An NBA analyst has just projected a brutal free agency move for the Miami Heat. So this year we do have a good amount of free agents, including Hayward Highsmith, DeLon Wright, Patty Mills, and that one I do have a little concern for because I love Patty Mills, but maybe we'll talk about that another time. But this one has to do with Caleb Martin, so we're going to get into what that prediction is. And also we're going to look at a proposed trade that involves Colin Sexton, and I'd say it's a very interesting one. But first to talk about Caleb Martin. So he has been with us since 2021, and I would say he's been fairly consistent in his time on the team. We're going to get a little bit more into his numbers in a second. But first, we're going to look at what specifically this free agency prediction is. So they state that Caleb Martin is going to decline his player option and get a raise elsewhere. Now, the reason I really like this prediction is because it is backed up by reason and facts. And as we probably all know, there's a lot of different predictions and rumors getting thrown around all the time. And a lot of them don't necessarily have anything to back up why they think this, but they specifically mention his $7.1 million player option being just not enough and that he is too expensive for us at this point in his career. And they also mention how this is what happened last year to Gabe Vincent and Max Strus. Same scenario. So I do believe that this is a really good prediction and has a big potential of happening. So to get into his numbers this season, he has averaged 10, 4, and 2, shooting 43% from the field and 35% from 3. So personally, I think these are pretty average numbers, honestly. I think that it's nothing crazy, but it also isn't terrible. Again, just average. He's been a good role player, consistent. I do think to his good times, like for example, last year in the conference finals, he was balling. He had 60% from 3. But overall, average numbers. So do I think this would be a huge loss? To be completely honest, not necessarily. You know, players want their money, obviously. So if he can get paid more somewhere else, so be it. No love lost. I don't think it's a major concern. I do think it's a big possibility. Now, I think other things that are more important to talk about are some trades, and I think that a lot of these trades and things being tossed around will have a huge effect for us. So we're going to look at a proposed trade that, like I said, includes Colin Sexton. So this trade is basically the most important thing to look at is what we're giving up for what we're getting, because right away, you know, kind of jumping the gun, I'm like, oh, Colin Sexton, like, yeah, I like Colin Sexton, you know, and I'm going to tell you guys a little bit more about what this trade would include. I personally think it's a pretty good one, but I like Colin Sexton because he is the type of player, he's like a little pit bull, and one thing about him is he would always annoy me so much playing against him. And I think that's a really good indicator on what type of player you would want on your team. Like, if they're annoying you as an opponent, then they're great to have on your team. Kind of like a Pat Bev. Pat Bev never annoys me, but it's kind of the same thing how people say about Pat. Like, you don't want to play against him, but you love him on your team. So this one is really interesting, and we're going to look at exactly what it would entail. So basically, the proposed trade is that it would send $72 million Jazz star Colin Sexton to the Heat, and what we would give up would be Duncan Robinson, the number 15th pick, and a 2026 second-round pick. So personally, I don't think this is a bad deal. I think it's a great deal. I know Duncan Robinson has been huge for us so many times, and don't get me wrong, I hate seeing a player go who has been with us their whole career. That's always really, really hard to part ways with someone who has been on your team since they've come into the NBA. But I do want to kind of look at their stats and the differences and talk a little bit about that. So Colin Sexton this season has averaged almost 19 points, almost 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 49% from the field, and almost 40% from 3. Now, those are not average numbers. Those are great numbers. And he is only 6'3", and I'd say that is one of the only concerns. But in terms of looking at him versus Duncan Robinson, we can see that Duncan has averaged 13, 2.5, 2.8, and shot 45% from the field and 40% from 3. So Colin Sexton is pretty much averaging more almost all around. We're obviously would lose some height. Duncan Robinson is 6'7", but again, they're just different types of players. Honestly, a bigger concern for me is not just, about comparing the offense or even the height. A big thing that I think is looking at age. Colin Sexton is 25 and Duncan Robinson is 30, and it always it surprises me every time whenever I see that he's 30, because I think I always forget that, because he doesn't seem 30, he doesn't look 30, he doesn't play 30, nothing about him screams 30, and 30 is not old, but in the NBA, every year matters, and it sucks that it's like that, but 5-year difference in NBA terms, it's kind of like dog years. In NBA years, that's a lot. So Duncan is approaching, well, he still has a lot of years left, don't get me wrong. But if we were to have someone like Colin Sexton who's only 25 and we could potentially keep him for a while, it's always great to have a young player like that. I mean, he's in his prime. He's probably going to be in his prime for a very long time. Offensively, I think it gives us a little bit of an edge over than, say, like a Duncan Robinson. And again, Duncan's been great. But in terms of this specifically, I think Colin Sexton would be really cool to have. My only concern, and this really has nothing to do with this specific trade, but just in general, I love seeing, who we could get and who we couldn't. But I do believe that one thing that I do think should kind of be a priority for us is size. And the reason I'm saying that is because obvious reasons, I think. I mean, Bam is amazing, right? It's Bam. But he is undersized. He's 6'9". That's undersized for a center, and he plays well above his height. I mean, he plays sometimes like a freaking 7-footer maybe, But I do think that there's been a problem kind of consistently, and I don't know if it's just because I have PTSD from like 2020 against the Lakers, LeBron, AD, Dwight, and it just seemed like no matter what we could do, they were just bigger than us, not even just height-wise, but size-wise, they were just bigger. And no matter how good you are at your position, you're always going to have an issue. You can do all the great offense in the world, but if the other team is bigger, it's going to be an issue. And in the Eastern Conference, it's not like it's small teams, even the Celtics have Horford and Tillman now. Giannis is always an issue. God forbid we get to the finals and play the Nuggets and play Joker. Like, I'm thinking well ahead in time. But, just to put it into perspective, I do think size would be a really great thing. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I think that a really cool trade option would be Valanciunas. Now, let me make this bigger so you can see. So, Valanciunas, and again, don't freak out if I'm saying his name wrong. There is a 3-minute video of Charles Barkley mispronouncing his name, so it's not just me. I think I'm saying it right. But the article states that he is making $15 million this year, right? But he is nearly 32, and he does want to really try to be a contender this coming season. So it also states that if he is willing to take the taxpayer mid-level exception, then he should be at the top of Miami's wish list. I hope that he is somewhere on top. I don't know if he's for sure the greatest that we could get, but I think he is a really good example of someone who would be amazing to potentially look at. To look at what he's done this season, he has averaged 12, 9, and 2, shooting 56% from the field and 31% from 3. And we're not going to look too deep into that. I mean, come on, he's a center. And he is 6'11", so that is only 2 inches taller than Bam. But the guy is huge. He's built like a brick house. Like a lot of these players that I mentioned that you're going to have trouble against, I don't think he's going to have trouble against. I think he's like hitting a wall. And I think a really cool thing, if we could get someone like him for Spoelstra to do, would be to play him alongside Bam, not just someone to play off the bench. And Bam could step into more of like a power forward role, and it would really take a lot of the defensive responsibility off of his back. And I think it would be super cool to see someone like a Valanciunas on the Heat. But I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about the proposed trade. Do you think Colin Sexton would be cool on the Heat? Do you think we would win that trade? Do you think we would lose? And also, what do you think about Valanciunas? Do you like my idea or not? But make sure you follow along. We're going to have a lot of updates coming soon, and they're probably going to be big. So stick around, and we'll see you next time.